Welcome to Keepers of the Word. We are an esoteric study group of Freemasons whose purpose is of sharing knowledge of mystery schools and debunking misconceptions about Freemasonry. You're here with Mike and Ron.
Disclaimer, any of the opinions expressed on Keepers of the Word do not reflect the opinions of other organizations or Masonic lodges. That is our disclaimer.
Thanks for joining us today. Today we are going to discuss the topic of a writing by Manly P. Hall. Mm-hmm. Manly P. Hall was a Mason. And this book that we are discussing today is Melchizedek and the Mystery of Fire. The first thing I want to point out is that it's only like 42 pages long, but it is essentially a tome. There is a lot of information to digest and take in, and so I recently read it. Mike has read it before. Mike.
I honestly, I think that book alone, again, it's only 43 pages long. It's more than it's just a lot of connecting the dots. There's a lot of things that Manly P. Hall brings into any one of his books, and he's also bringing in other mystery schools as well, and he's putting them all together to give you a whole view of it all. So when you read anything Manly P. Hall, you're not reading just on one thing. You're reading something where he actually did his homework and went and gathered all this information for us, so that way we can make our own assumption.
Exactly. And he gathered lots of information from lots of mystery schools and was a wealth of information as far as all of these ancient teachings and esoterics are concerned. Delving into Melchizedek and the Mystery of Fire, it's basically broken down into three sections. The first part one is Fire, the Universal Deity. Essentially, he talks about the fact that the ancients, all of the ancients at some point in history were sun worshipers and fire worshipers, and connects that fire within man. So what's your impression of what he's talking about in that section?
Well, it's basically talking about the light and the initiation. The light being from within, or looking for God being the light, and that is what he talks about through all the different mystery schools that he brings together in that book. As he's talking about it, he's pretty much saying that the light in different mystery schools means the same thing. It's something that you're awakening within.
It's a divine light.
Exactly.
Within.
And the initiations per mystery school also correlated with a certain part of the organ of the body. And there's something I wanted to cover here. It's a brief excerpt of the book. The temples of the ancients were patterned after the human form, as a study of the ground plan of either the sanctuary at Karnak or of St. Peter's Church at Rome will prove if the places of initiations were copies from the body of a man. The rituals which were given in the various chambers and passageways symbolize certain processes taking in place in the human body. Freemasonry is an excellent example of a doctrine intimating by means of pageants and dramas, that the regeneration of the human soul is largely a physiological and biological problem. For the reason, the craft is divided into two parts, speculative and operative masonry. In the lodge room, masonry is speculative, for the lodge is only a symbol of the human organism. Operative masonry is a series of mystic activities taking place within the physical and spiritual organisms of those who have assumed its obligations. And obligations meaning something that you're being initiated into and it's being asked of you. So you're taking on these obligations as you're moving forward into whatever mystery school you're being a part of or you're joining.
Correct. And with that being specifically Freemasonry, with what he's talking about there. I have an excerpt where he says, the mystery schools of ancient Egypt taught that the blood was the vehicle of consciousness. The spirit of man traveled through the bloodstream and therefore was not actually located in any one part of the compound organism. It moved through the body with the rapidity of thought, so that consciousness of self, cognition of externals, and sense perception could be localized in any part of the body by the exercise of the willpower.
So, there's a lot to decipher in his writings. Talking about the mystics, tracing the sun worship back to Lemuria and the origin of the human race. We're talking about sun being the ruler of the plant and animal kingdoms, and as well as the human kingdoms, and fire being the only thing that could subjugate metal. Fire itself is something that most of the ancient religions or mystery schools took very, very. They held it with high regard because it brought many things. It brought light. You were able to subjugate metal. You were able to create things with fire. And also it meant something within, that you're awakening something within you that where you can create and you can do the same thing from a speculative aspect. So looking at these different ways that Manly P. Hall showed what fire is and what it meant, it's different to each of the schools. That's where I feel we need to dig deeper into that, because each of the schools had something different to say about fire, but yet they all met at the same place.
Correct, yeah. And he mentioned something about the divinity of fire being something that basically gave man divinity, because it was, within the stories of the, who was it that brought fire down Prometheus brought fire from the gods to man, and at that point, then man could not be destroyed by the gods because he had fire, the divine spark of the gods.
Right, which leads me to this next excerpt. The names of nearly all the great gods and saviors have been associated with either the element of fire or the solar light, or its correlate, the mystics and spiritual light invisible. Jupiter, Apollo, Hermes, Mithras, Bacchus, Dionysus, Odin, Buddha, Krishna, Zoroaster, Vishnu, Shiva, Agni, Balder, Hiram Abiff, Moses, Samson, Jason, Vulcan, Uranus, Allah, Osiris, Ra, Bel, Baal, Serapis, and King Solomon are some of the numerous deities and supermen whose symbolic attributes are derived from the manifestations of the solar power and whose names indicate their relationships to light and fire. But men were thoughtless and unkind. They took the divine fire brought to them by Prometheus and used it to destroy one another. They burned the homes of their enemies, and with the aid of heat, they tempered steel, making swords and armor. They grew more selfish and more arrogant, defying the gods. But they could not be destroyed, for they possessed the sacred fire. For this disobedience, Prometheus was chained for 1,000 years, just I guess like Lucifer. But the Greek hero was placed upon the brow of Mount Caucasus, there to remain with a vulture gnawing at his liver until a human being should master the sacred fire and become perfect.
And I have a note on that. Occultism teaches that the presence of the liver, which distinguishes the animal from the plant, and that mystically certain small creatures have power of motion, but no liver, are actually plants in spiritual consciousness. The liver is under the control of the planet Mars, which is the dynamo of this solar system, and which sends a red, animating ray to all the evolving creatures within this solar scheme.
Well, going back to Prometheus, the master of fire, The prophecy was fulfilled by Hercules, who climbed Mount Caucasus and broke the fetters of Prometheus and liberated the friend of man who had been in torture for so many ages. Hercules represented the initiate, who, as his name implies, partakes of the glory of light. Prometheus is the vehicle of solar energy. So we're looking at this from the initiate, from the beginning, right? You're starting off into any mystery school and you're walking in, and there's things that are asked of you to see how you light that fire within, right? And that's in the first degree of Masonry. You're what do you seek? You seek light, right? You're seeking light,
Right.
And this in other mystery schools was pretty much done the same way, but through different practices. It's kind of it's universal if you think about it, because if you go back to even the ancient Mayans, they worshiped fire as well. Any of the old ancient indigenous ancient cultures had fire worship in them. And even in Christianity, if you look at some ancient pictures of Jesus or saints, you see that solar orb behind their head, as it's a homage to the sun, Soli Victus. So this fire in this book, bringing in Melchizedek. Where does Melchizedek fit into this? I'll let you drink your drink.
I don't know. Where does Melchizedek fit into this?
Well, he was Melchizedek. The word Melchizedek means high priest, and those that found Jesus, and I'll let you get into that excerpt later, is he was of the Melchizedek order, which the order of the high priest. So there's a lot to go off of that, because if you go into the Bible, it gives you these little seeds on Melchizedek, on Jesus, and they're talking about this in the background. We know that there's more, right? But the truth is, the church doesn't want you to talk about this. They don't want you to know the background behind all of these things. Well, which is why we are here. We want to talk about that. But more so is what was the order of Melchizedek? Where did that come from? And I believe it came from the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud. And during that time, those were the guys who were studying, the ancient mystery schools, and we're talking about sun worship, and we're talking about fire and how to light the spirit of the spirit within, the fire within. So if that correlates to Jesus, then technically Christianity is a mystery school.
Absolutely.
So I'll let you get into that part.
Okay, well, let's see. I don't know if I'm there yet, but
I'm sorry. We just drove there.
Okay, we did drive there. All right. Why would Christianity not be a mystery school? Its founder was an initiate of the Essenian mysteries. The Essenes were disciples of the great Pythagoras and were also connected with the secret schools of India. The master Jesus was himself a hierophant, deeply versed in the ancient arcanum. St. John, by his writings, proves himself to be acquainted with the ritualism of the Egyptian cult. And it is contended that St. Matthew was the teacher of Basilidas, the immortal Egyptian sage, co-founder with Simon Magus of Gnosticism, the most elaborate system of Christian mysticism that has ever evolved from the main stem of St. Peter's Church. During its early history in Rome, Christianity was in constant contact with Mithraism, the fire philosophy of Persia, from which it borrowed no small part of its rituals and ceremonials.
So to say that Christianity does not have any pagan roots or its origins in any mystery school, that's kind of dumb to say. and
It's ignorant.
It's ignorant.
It's definitely ignorant.
If you look at Jesus, whenever you bring up that subject and we're talking about Jesus, we know that he was gone for a very long time, from I believe the age of 12 till before he was 23.
30 till like 30 or whatever.
Right. And in that time, where was he? There's books that say that he was, in the Himalayas, or in
Monk. He went to
he was
the
a monk.
east.
Yeah.
He studied. Yeah,
Studied with his
there's
saints.
lots of theories.
So if he brought that knowledge back with him, he brought back a different way of being and worship and understanding. Because if you look at the Hebrew religion versus Buddhism or versus Hinduism, they're very different. They carry some similarities, but they're different. One's more laid back than the other. I mean, the ancient Hebrews were.
I think unless you talk about like the Kabbalah, where then you're talking about more alignment with Hinduism and some of the other ancient.
But if you're not talking about the Kabbalah, you're talking about the Torah, then that's a whole other ballpark, and now we're into something completely different. So bringing it back to, let's go into Madame Blavatsky. And Isis Unveiled gives a number of formulae for the making of ever-burning lamps, and states in a footnote that she herself saw one made by a disciple of the Hermetic arts, which had burned steadily without fuel for 6 years previous to the publication of her book. Now there's this fire, these lamps. Some of these lamps have said to have burned for thousands of years.
Yep, 1,500 years.
1,500
One
years.
of them that was supposedly had asbestos as part of its makeup.
Fuel, right?
Yeah.
So they burned without oxygen, which is weird because
Correct.
we all know that fire needs oxygen. So there must have been something else that I guess we don't know of till today that works. But if they had it and the Egyptians had it, and they put it in tombs, and people opened the tombs and they were still on hundreds or thousands of years later, that's kind of creepy. Think about it.
I think it's really ignorant of us to think that ancient cultures weren't as advanced, if not more advanced than we are. I mean, I don't remember if it was in here or something else I was recently reading, but they were talking about the Egyptian priests that were essentially doctors and scientists and all of that all rolled into one, and they had extensive knowledge of the human systems. Human anatomy, the brain and the spinal cord and all of the different parts of the human body. They were very, very well versed in what the makeup was and how to deal with it.
Speaking of body parts, the mystics looked upon the liver as the source of heat and power in the blood. Hence, the significant that hence that the spear of the centurion should pierce the liver of Christ, and the vulture should be placed over the liver of Prometheus to torment him throughout the ages. So the liver plays a big part when it comes to the whole fire thing, because it's the part that cleans the blood. It heats everything up.
It plays a role with the red corpuscles. So, and I mean that's the part of us that keeps us alive. A good part of it with the red blood cells.
So light in general, fire, sun worship, whatever you want to call it, we could trace that back to all indigenous tribes, religions, and I think that's what Manly P. Hall was trying to show us, that the origins go deeper than what we thought, especially in Christianity. They go further back into the ancient pagan religions that showed, how we worshiped fire and why we worshiped fire. And if you think about it, it makes sense, because if you woke up in the morning and you saw the sun rise, and because the sun rises, the plants grow, or things happen when the sun rises for your benefit, then of course you're going to worship the sun because it's doing things for you. But at what point do you say, okay, let's separate science and religion? Of course, back then they didn't know that.
Yeah,
So
I don't think it really was separated back then. It science that, like I said, the priests were scientists and doctors and all things knowledge based. So.
yeah, it's interesting.
Oh,
Whenever
this
you,
is the excerpt. It actually was, and so the second section of this reading is "Man, the Great Symbol of Mysteries," and so the excerpt that I was talking about, basically, let's see. Egypt during the 18th dynasty, that is about 17 centuries before Christ, had a medical knowledge comparable to that of the 20th century. Professor Breasted is quoted as follows, quote, "For instance, in it, the Edwin Smith Papyrus, an early scientific document, the word brain appears for the first time recorded in human speech, and there is evidence that the Egyptians understood the localization of brain control of the muscles, a knowledge that has only been rediscovered within the last generation."
so if we're correlating the brain with fire or the divine spark, right? Intelligence.
Correct.
Those who are within the divine spark understand that there's more to just waking up every day and putting on your pants, right? So with that, I think they understood that there's more to life than what was just being shown to them. There was things that were deeper and that needed to be looked for rather than, being, it's not like the initiate. It's not going to be handed to you. You have to earn it. Just like the Pythagoras, the Pythagorean cult, they in order for you to join, you had to be silent for about 5 years. Things like that gave you this discipline to move forward, to prove yourself to those who already walked that path. Especially like in Masonry, you have to prove yourself to go through the first degree, and understand that there's an obligation for you, and you have to walk a certain way, and the light is given to you under those pretexts, under those circumstances. If you go outside of that light, then you're in a dark place. You're not going to be welcomed. And I believe that in all the other mystery schools, that was looked at that way, but probably held to a higher. You got killed if you stepped out.
Absolutely. A lot of the mystery schools, from what I've been reading up on, people didn't make it through their initiation. Sometimes they died. They went out into the desert for 40 days or whatever the initiation process was for a lot of the mystery schools, resulted in death for neophytes. They didn't make it through.
Light is not only sacred because it dispels the darkness in which lurks all the enemies of human life. It's also sacred because it is the vehicle of life. It is evidence that the direct of sunlight upon plant, animals, and human life. Light is also the vehicle of color, the coloring matter of all earthly things being imparted from the sun. It is the vehicle of heat, and according to the wisdom of antiquity, it carries the sperm of all things from the sun. So as I was saying earlier, the sun came up, things grew, it fed things, and that is what we live off of.
Went through a process, the 12 months, the seasons, the death of the sun, the resurrection of the sun.
So the light ends up becoming more than just the spiritual flame. It becomes something that we need to take as we were living off of. This is something that we needed on a day-to-day basis. There's this God that comes
our life
up.
Force.
Yeah, this God comes up in the 12th hour, and it shows his face for 12 hours and then goes away. And we worship that God because it gives us all these things, right? All these things that benefit humanity. Depending on where you were on the earth, and that'll also depend on how you worshipped the sun or fire or the divine light. And according to Pythagoras, the body of God is composed of the substance of light. Where light is, God is. Who worships light worships God. Who serves light serves God. Now, technically, that doesn't mean worshiping fire, the sun. Light, I mean, to me, it means all things that are good. That positive energy that is out there. If you worship that
divine spark within us,
the higher version of yourself, right?
Yep.
So it's interesting.
Well, and on that subject, part of what Manly P. Hall talks about in this section, he's talking about religious, especially Christians, taking literal interpretations of the texts. And he says they would learn that the Old Testament, if they actually recognize, they would learn that the Old Testament was not to be considered literally, that concealed between its lines were certain secret teachings without which the true meaning of the Hebrew writings cannot be discovered. They would no longer laugh at the pagans for their plurality of gods, for they would discover that they themselves, if faithful followers of their scriptures, are polytheists. The word Elohim is used in the early chapters of Genesis and translated God is a masculine, feminine plural word meaning a number of gods who are androgynous and not one supreme deity. They would realize that Adam was not a man, but a species, a race of creatures. They would also realize that the Garden of Eden was not located in Asia Minor.
Well, I think there's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down on this alone. Just to cover, going back to Manly P. Hall, there's more than just this book. There's about 1,000 different publications or more, and some of them are small reads, short reads that are like 40 pages, 50 pages, 90 pages. But when you get into these books, he's taking you down different corridors of the same subject, or he's taking you down different versions of a subject. And it's up to you to decipher what it really is. And it's important for you to read with an open mind, because he's not just bringing one version of what religion or what occult mystery schools opinions are. He's giving you the whole gamut of it. And it's interesting how he plays it all in at one shot, because he's telling you all these things, but he's bringing in Christianity. He's bringing in Odinism. He's bringing in the Mithraism. He's bringing in the Vedas.
Egyptian.
I mean, we could go on and on. It's interesting.
So here's a note, a quotation. The Masonic order is founded in the secret schools of the pagan antiquity, many of the symbols of which are preserved to this day in the various degrees of the Blue Lodge and the Scottish Rite. Concerning the origins of the name Freemason, which is itself a key to the doctrines of the order, Robert Hewitt Brown, 32nd degree, writes, quote, long before the building of the King Solomon's Temple, Masons were known as the Sons of Light. Masonry was practiced by the ancients under the name of Lux, light, or its equivalent in the various languages of antiquity. We are informed by several distinguished writers that the word masonry, is a corruption of the Greek word mesonreineo. Excuse me for pronouncing that wrong. Which signifies I am in the midst of heaven, alluding to the sun, which being in the midst of heaven is the great source of light. Others derive it directly from the ancient Egyptian Phre, the sun, and Mas, a child. Phre Masen, children of the sun or sons of light.
So, let's get into the Egyptian side of things. Right, they had many different ways of looking at fire, especially when you died. You know, the soul left and went back to the all. That is the divine light. But the way they looked at it was, are you ready to cross over did you do right here in order to get to back to the origin of where you came from?
Did you prepare yourself to reunite with the one?
Yeah. And it's interesting because if we put those teachings into today, and we're talking about this now, is what did you do from the point that you were born to the time that you died in order to get into whatever version of heaven you're into, right? Or whatever version of the afterlife you're into. What are you doing to get in, to solidify? And now, in some orders, they don't care. It's like, I do me, But in most of these Egyptians, like especially in Egyptian mystery school, you had to be a good person. You had to do right here in order to get back to the origins.
True. Also, though, in the third section of this writing, the sacred fire in the spine and brain, there's extensive talk about essentially the Kundalini energy and the path of being able to ignite that divine spark within us and essentially ascend and recognize that we have all of that within us. So, as above, so below. Yes, we're doing good things here, but part of that, I think, is a matter of perfecting our temple, our physical body on this realm, on this plane, and preparing ourselves for that which is next. And I think that the third section of this definitely discusses ways to ascend.
Seek the light.
Correct.
In seeking light, in Masonry, as you're going through your degrees, you're seeking more knowledge. You're seeking more light being knowledge. How that is attained, you have to study. You have to read. You have to talk to those who have gone down that path. And I believe, back in the day, things were passed down mouth to ear, and, this knowledge was given to you if you were worthy. And what I mean by worthy is, are you able to decipher this knowledge and put it to application within your life? If you don't and you can't, then you are not worthy. If you were too ignorant to understand what the light is or what your purpose is, then you did not go forward. You were stuck in that area until you figured it out. And I believe in Masonry, it's kind of the same thing. I'm pretty sure many have their own opinions as in our fraternity. How do we seek light and move forward? You could go through your degrees and not know shit. It's a fact. But some could go through their degrees and learn a lot and continue to learn. I feel like I don't stop learning. I'm continuously learning as we move forward. And it is through the great people that you surround yourself with, which in essence gives you more light, makes you more knowledgeable, and makes you a better person, a better version of what you were yesterday. And a lot of people ask me, well, what is Masonry about? In short, it's about making yourself a better person than what you were yesterday, to grow your light to be as bright as possible. And I believe that's what we're really talking about in Melchizedek and the Mystery of Fire, is where it came from and why it was. And I think that's the why it was. What are your opinions?
He mentioned something about the sons of Cain and the sons of Abel, and that very much about what you were just talking about, whether or not you had the ability to understand and think and use that, or whether you are just another one of the sheep. And those were the differences between the sons of Cain and the sons of Abel. And I agree, you're absolutely... If you're able to know what you're searching for and know what path, at least know a path that you want to head towards, and being within Masonry, you are going to seek that light, and you're going to do exactly what you said. You're going to try to make yourself a better person every single day. That's what the divine spark. That's part of what the divine spark is all about. So
correct. And as you move along through your degrees, they get more intense. There's more asked of you. You have more responsibilities, and you're taking on a lot more within yourself, because that's what it's preparing you to do. And in all the ancient mystery schools, as you went through different initiations, those parts got more intense. And again, like you said, some people didn't make it.
yeah.
Some people died during their initiation, and that was normal. It was like, hey, well, Pablo didn't make it. He didn't get through the first degree because he didn't duck, and he got caught with a sword, and I don't know. But unfortunately, fortunately, we don't have that today, because it is, it's different. Yeah, man, it's interesting. Do we have anything going on there that we want to share? Anybody want to ask? Anybody want to ask some questions? I'm looking at you.
Well, Mr. Namoka wants to ask funny questions.
Namoka, let's entertain Namoka.
So how do you know when Casper's in your underwear?
Really?
Yeah. So
that's stupid.
Next.
Next question.
that's all I got.
So, mathematical. Well, what is your take on gematria?
There we go.
Well, that's a good question. Geometry.
Well, gematria is different than geometry. Gematria is the ancient numerology of the Hebrew text. Basically, it's a numerical system that the letters of the Hebrew alphabet equate to numerical
Numbers.
values, to numbers, and different words add up to different numerical values, and those and other words that have similar numerical values have similar meanings, have similar connotations. Gematria is very, very interesting. I did some studies on gematria a few years ago, going down a rabbit hole when I was getting into some subject matter of the Lost Master's words. So there's some.
Did it connect dots for you?
It did. It absolutely did. It was. It supposedly the geometric value has a correlation from other phrases and words and terminologies, which absolutely now studying Manly P. Hall and reading some of his descriptions of what the Lost Master's word refers to, it correlates exactly to what I found out when I was going down that rabbit hole. Many years
Interesting.
ago.
Well, I'm sorry for my ignorance. I
That's
thought
okay.
he was
That's
talking
cool.
about geometry, which I was going to lead into and say, well, it's the measurement of all things. It's the key to the universe. If I may, do we have any more questions? Just keep going.
Keep going. I'm trying to get some good questions.
Okay, Joe. Our production wants us to keep going. I don't know. Going forward, we wanted to talk about Manly P. Hall. We wanted to talk about this book, the Melchizedek and the Mystery of Fire, because we feel that Manly P. Hall was a wealth of knowledge. He alone, at the age of 25, wrote this tome that is sitting before us right here. This is The Secret Teachings of All Ages. This book itself, I believe, is the second print or second edition.
Our particular book that we have on the table here is a second edition, from what I understand. My research leads me to find out that the very first edition of this book was specific to those that helped to produce the book, and so it was a smaller print. This particular print, the second edition, was still a smaller print, but it was presentations to lodges where Manly P. Hall actually traveled throughout his journeys. I don't know if it was just California, possibly just California, possibly other places as well, but definitely he went and presented these particular tomes, the second edition, to lodges in and masters of lodges, and actually hand signed them. So this is definitely a piece of antiquity that we have here at our lodge, because our charter goes back to 1898. So would have been around the time, I believe it was the early 1908 or something like that, when this print.
This one was
went into-
1928.
Okay.
Yeah, 1928.
So the 20s. I mean,
At the age of 25 to write this,
right.
that's crazy.
Absolutely.
Today, that if somebody said, "Oh, I'm writing this book on the secret teachings of all ages," you'd laugh at them. There's no way. But being who he was, raised by Rosicrucians, being around the Rosicrucian order, he had a lot of information at a very young age. So
and then
it's
becoming
believable.
a Mason.
Yes, and then becomes a Mason, a 33rd degree. He really accomplished a lot in his time. And if you're able to check out, every time somebody asks me, which book should I read if I want to brush up on the mystery schools, this is the go-to.
Yeah.
The Secret Teachings of All Ages. You want to get that book. You could get it online for like $14-15. I recommend getting the bigger version because it has all of the drawings, and it's a lot bigger. You could read the text a little bit better. It's a really good read. It's a hard read because there's just so much that he covers. He goes from one thing to the next.
Reading Manly P. Hall is
Egyptian
not
history.
easy to read. Like
No,
I said, this small book that we're talking about today, 40 pages, and yet it is so much to digest and break down the what's going on in the brain of Manly P. Hall when he's writing. Just has to be crazy.
Yeah, definitely. So do we have any more questions, sir?
Little something.
Okay. Where is the Melchizedek order today? That's a good question. I don't know. Is that a good answer? Probably not. Probably not. Cryptic degrees in Gematria. I'm gonna. Didn't you go down the York, right?
York.
Yeah.
No, there's cryptic in York, yeah. There wasn't really. I don't remember any Gematria being introduced into the cryptic degrees personally. I think there's a lot more. I think there's a lot more esoterics as far as magic is concerned within those degrees. That's my personal opinion, but.
Okay. Lucifer the Light, your thoughts? Well, we could talk about Lucifer. You could look at him as Prometheus as well. He was the light bringer.
Talked about that.
He brought it down to us, and you could look at that in many different ways. Was he giving us knowledge? Why did he go away from the light and share that with us? It's really interesting. Yeah. Lucifer itself, it's a whole other show. I think that topic can be looked at at many different ways. It could be looked at in a positive or in a negative. As we are taught from young age, we look at it from a negative. If you read Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, he's looking at it from a different version of what Lucifer means, and he's talking about light as in knowledge, not the devil, or he's talking about it in a different way. It's interesting. It's a good topic, and I believe we'll cover that one of these shows and just get into what Lucifer or Satan, however you want to, whatever you want to go. We could go down that rabbit hole some other time, but let's see. Yeah.
I'll throw a quick answer out from my search of the Google machine, looking up Melchizedek. It appears that Melchizedek order refers to a lineage that was not under Aaron. So if if it has any connection today, it would probably be something that you would look up within within Judaism.
Judaism?
So
Okay.
that would be.
Do you guys know anything about RH bloodline?
RH negative?
Yeah.
It's supposedly not of this earth. It's in the Basque region, or it originated in the Basque region.
And Celtic. Yeah.
And Celtic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The rarest.
It's one of the rarest. I believe they can give their blood to anybody, but they can only receive RH negative. My wife is RH negative. That's why I know this. That's how you're an alien. You're weird. But it's a special thing. If you look at it, and unfortunately, medicine cannot understand it, and it's interesting. So you are that Dionysus Morning Star. Okay, well, good for you. So I hope that answered your question, and you're satisfied. Okay, we good? Do we have any more questions? Somebody wanted to know if they should buy a boat. Well, if you have the money, fuck it. I hope that answered your question too. So let's move on. So, do we have any more excerpts from Melchizedek towards the end?
Yeah, I know. I kind of dropped off.
You dropped off? It's all right.
I read that last section.
Was the sum of it?
The sacred fire in the spine and brain. It's a very, in a nutshell, it's pretty much talking about Kundalini and the fluids from the brain, and there's all kinds of correlations to descriptions in the Bible of the land of milk and honey and the being brought out of Egypt, and supposedly those are all stories that are talking about the process of awakening the electrical, our system in the spinal cord and the brain, and he talks about the importance of the spinal cord and the brain, and I've heard correlations to that before. I've heard correlations about Santa Claus and the stories of the 8 reindeer and all of those types of things also being hidden, and essentially I think that's what Manly P. Hall is trying to talk about in that section, is that this is information that was absolutely esoteric. This is hidden mysteries that ancients knew about and understood and encoded in order to keep away from someone who just was irresponsible, that was ignorant.
Right.
And
it's funny, speaking on that, is you have a lot of people who are angry because these mystery schools don't share their knowledge with everyone. Well, there's a reason for that, because not everyone is privy to this. You need to be worthy, or show that you're worthy to have this knowledge in order to decipher it in a positive, productive way. And going back to Lon, when he's talking about magic and the practice of magic, you have to be mentally sane and understand what you're doing, because if not, you go down these rabbit holes and you end up lost, asking yourself stupid questions and stuck in this loop of stupidity and ignorance.
Yeah.
And that's why this knowledge is not for everyone.
And even for those that it is for, sometimes it becomes a lifetime journey through this enlightenment process, this spirituality trek that we get on. Because even I think back to almost 15 years ago when I joined the lodge and started getting information about this mystery school that is Freemasonry. And really it took me years and years to go on my path to be able to process a lot of the information and interpret it and understand it and be able to use it the way that it should be used, to chip away at the rough ashlar to make myself a better person every single day.
And I think that's the whole purpose of just living and it doesn't have to be a mystery school. You don't have to be a Mason to figure that part out. Is what are you doing to make yourself a better person? Who are you surrounding yourself with? What are you reading? And how are you applying that to make yourself a better person or the world around you a better place? And I think that's important.
So relate that to the silver cord and the golden bowl.
Silver cord and
Most of your time.
well, technically, the silver cord and the golden bowl are the skull is the golden bowl, and the silver cord is the spinal cord. So.
So there we go. Do we have any
Yeah,
more
which
questions?
it's really interesting that our junior deacon who has been working on senior deacon work is learning the perambulation prayer for the third degree, which talks about the golden bowl and the silver cord, and the whole verse that is given to the candidate is all about death. It is absolutely all about a reflection of what's happening at the end of your life, and all of those things that are talked about within it are, when you talk about the strong men shall bow themselves, you're talking about the arms, your muscles. You're now bowing yourself, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. You're losing your eyesight. The golden bowl is broken. The silver cord is loosed. It's all references. It's all references to the human body, which is exactly what we're talking about in the second section of this particular book. The temple, our temple, and at that point, death. So.
Okay. Going back, I'm looking at another one. What is your take on time travel or jump rooms?
Talking about Kundalini and Metatron's cube.
Astral projection, Metatron. Well, in Kundalini, awakening those chakras and taking yourself up, that Kundalini meditation, that can be technically looked at as a time travel, because you're raising your consciousness. You're going from one point to another. That could be looked at that way. Relating that into a jump room, I don't even know what the hell that is. That I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that, and that's okay.
That is okay.
That's okay. But I saw another question on here that I wanted to. Do you believe Isaac Newton's alchemy is relevant to the practice of spiritual growth and awareness? How can it be applied? Well, alchemy in general can be applied because it's transmutation. And anything, I mean, it's the changing of, metals to gold, but within yourself, changing your mental alchemy to become a better person. That's how you apply it. Understanding who you are first, and then making the changes necessary to become the greater you. That's alchemy, and the application of that can vary. There's different ways of doing it. More importantly is understanding yourself first. I think that's the more important part. Once you understand yourself, then you can change yourself to be a better version of yourself. That's the way I feel.
Agreed.
Okay.
Apparently, I don't know what ARCs are, but I looked up jump rooms. ARCs are used to travel to Mars and back nearly instantaneously. They apparently operate by quantum entanglement. Several whistleblowers have discussed ARC jump rooms and Mars bases. The latest whistleblowers are NASA astronauts. The CIA is highly involved with Mars and ARC jump rooms. Yeah, it's some conspiracy stuff that
weird
who
shit.
knows, maybe it.
Thanks,
I don't know.
fucking Sean.
Is that where that came from?
Yeah. It's okay. So, yeah, I think, what are we doing? We're doing this. You want alchemy? We got it. You got Alchemic Jungle coming this Saturday. We got DJ Apex One, our own Omen, You Owe Me, and BC Ryda, hosted by Chemist. So if you want to see some old school jungle, you want to hear some badass jungle, this is a spot to come to. Go to jungleism.com, get your tickets, get on the mailing list, and come party with us. We're going to have a good time.
When is that?
That's this Saturday, the 15th.
Day after tomorrow.
Yeah. So get your tickets now because we kind of need this shit to happen.
And then next Saturday, the 22nd, we got something else going on over here.
We
right?
got St. John's Feast, which if you've never been to a St. John's Feast at LA Harbor Lodge, well, you better get your ass down here because it's a party.
And even if you have, still get your ass down here because this year these guys have stepped up the game for this year. We've got challenge coins and our firing cannons that will be part of the swag that you'll get to take home. There's going to be some giveaways in between the 7 toasts. Some musical and visual stimulations for your senses. It's going to be a damn good time.
Yeah, there's other Masonic things going on that same day, but you really want to be here because we're cool, and and you're going to have fun here. Trust me, it's a good time. Not taking away from everything else that's going on, but I could guarantee you a good time here.
SanPedroMasons.org. You can get your tickets, $60. This Saturday is our final day for pre-sales, so no tickets will be sold at the door. Men 21 and older are welcome. All Masons and those interested in Masonry as well, we welcome to our feast.
Yeah, it's a feast, and you're probably going to get sauced, so you might want to Uber. It's something you might want to do.
Have your wife drop you off, your girlfriend drop you off. Yep.
And, she's going to pick you up drunk and out of hand, maybe half naked. I don't know.
Well, maybe you.
It's fun. It's a good time. We have a damn good time. So I want you guys to come party with us, hang out, enjoy yourselves. And that's basically it. The only other thing, next week we have 2 guests coming in. We got Jeriel of the SoCal Research Lodge, and we have Dago Rodriguez of South Pasadena Lodge. He's the worshipful master of South Pass, and he's also one of the creators of Masonicon, which is coming up in July. Next month. That's going to be fun. We plan on going. It's going to be a good time, and we're going to talk about it next week. So we hope that you guys stay tuned. Tune in next week, and that's about it. Don't
forget. We have what else? We have our own.
We have our own September 8th Esotericon. We're having. So I'm sorry. I'm thinking about my birthday. I apologize. September 7th, Esotericon. We have a lot. We're getting a lot of vendors now.
Yep.
Again, we only have 20 spaces at $75, which is a deal. And
our speakers are locked in.
Speakers are locked in. Speakers, we have Merrick Hamer. We have Lon Milo Duquette. Mm-hmm. We have Daniel Olexa. We have Siren of the Order of Lightning, and we just got our own James Bracero, who's going to talk about Enoch. And I am looking forward to just that in itself. Prior to that, we'll probably talk about it a little more, but we got that locked in, and you can't run now, James. It's going to happen. We're going to make it happen.
K-Zac
We're about
listener.
making shit happen.
K-Zac listener.
So we look forward to it. I want to say thank you to all our viewers. Please subscribe, follow, share, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. We appreciate it. And thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We're out.